Hi there, welcome back to Cosmo's universe. Seasonal changes are experienced in different ways depending on where you live. From most places on Earth, it's usually very hot in summer and quite cold in winter. Some trees lose their leaves in autumn, and in spring some plants tend to give off pollen and flowers bloom. But what causes the seasons? We know the Earth rotates around its axis once every 24 hours. The Earth's rotational axis is tilted at an angle of about 23.4 degrees compared to something called the orbital axis. The Earth's daytime side faces the Sun, while the nighttime side faces away. I'll get back to these day and night sides a little later. We also know that the Earth orbits or revolves around the Sun about once every 365 days, which is known as an Earth year. An important feature to note is that throughout the Earth's entire orbit, the Earth's axis points to exactly the same direction in space. So if we look at a particular position of the Earth around its orbit, we can notice that the North Pole is tilted towards the Sun, while the South Pole is tilted away from the Sun. But when the Earth is in the opposite position in 6 months' time, now it's the South Pole that's tilted towards the Sun and the North Pole is tilted away. So, throughout the year, most of the continents on Earth are affected because their relative positions and angles at which they face the Sun constantly change. We can use Australia as an example. When the South Pole tilts towards the Sun, the angle at which the Sun's rays hit Australia is almost 90 degrees, making the Sun appear very high in the midday sky. Because the Sun's heat energy lands on this part of the Earth more directly, the average temperature becomes quite hot. In this position, it's summer in the Southern Hemisphere, including Australia. But in 6 months' time in winter, when the South Pole tilts away from the Sun, Australia's position is lower, and the angle of the Sun's rays is much shallower. The same amount of heat energy is now distributed, but over a much larger area, causing the average temperature to be lower. Also, the further south you go, the colder it gets because the angle of the Sun's rays become even shallower, causing the heat energy to spread out even more. And of course, the further north you travel, winters become much milder as the heat energy becomes a little more concentrated. Most countries situated in the Southern Hemisphere will experience winter at the same time of year. The opposite is true with countries in the Northern Hemisphere. When it's winter in the Southern Hemisphere, it's summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and vice versa. Another interesting thing that happens during the seasons is the change in the length of day and night. This too is because of the Earth's tilt. When it's summer in the Southern Hemisphere, for instance, the Sun's rays cover more area towards the south, causing us to spend more time in daylight and less time at night. Again, the opposite will be true in the Northern Hemisphere. Those people will spend more time in night and less time in day because it's winter. And the further north or south you live, the difference in time between night and day becomes greater. In winter, it's quite common for some places in the far south or north to have night start as early as 2 o'clock in the afternoon. These same people won't even see the sun rise again until about 10 o'clock in the morning. That's only 4 hours of daylight. The shortest day of the year is called the winter solstice. In the Southern Hemisphere, the winter solstice happens on either the 20th or the 21st of June, and in the Northern Hemisphere, on either the 21st or the 22nd of December. And the longest day of the year is called the summer solstice, which occurs between the 20th and the 23rd of December in the Southern Hemisphere, and between the 20th and the 22nd of June in the Northern Hemisphere. We could also ask, what happens to the length of day and night in spring or autumn? Let's have a look at the Earth in its spring position. But this time we'll move our viewing position in space so that the Sun is on the right and Earth on the left, with the South Pole facing away from us. We can see that in spring the Earth's axis isn't pointing towards or away from the Sun. Instead, the axis is at 90 degrees to the Sun's rays. Because of this, night and day are exactly the same length everywhere on Earth. This is called the spring or vernal equinox, which occurs on either the 22nd or the 23rd of September in the southern hemisphere, and on either the 20th or the 21st of March in the northern hemisphere. There's also an autumnal equinox, when day and night are of equal length, and all we need to do is swap the northern and southern spring equinox dates. There's something else really amazing about all this. In summer in the southern hemisphere, for instance, if you were to travel far enough south, you'd reach a point where day becomes so long, it actually equals 24 hours. In other words, the sun wouldn't even set in the middle of summer. Instead, it would simply move around you during the day. In the middle of winter, at the same position on Earth, night is so long that the sun doesn't even rise. The line that defines this limit in the south is called the Antarctic Circle, and in the north it's called the Arctic Circle. There are two other special lines that are defined by the Earth's tilt. In the southern hemisphere during the middle of summer, the line around the Earth where the sun's rays hit at exactly 90 degrees is called the Tropic of Capricorn. At midday from this latitude on Earth, the sun would appear directly overhead. There's also a similar line for the northern hemisphere called the Tropic of Cancer. The area between these two lines is called the tropics. People living in the tropics don't generally experience winter because the heat energy never spreads out all that much. Instead, these people usually experience what are known as dry and wet seasons. I really hope this has helped you gain a little more understanding about the seasons. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time in Cosmo's Universe.